Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Welcome to part 1 of our How to Launch a Startup with Cold Email series. This is where we talk about startups and cold email. And in this part, Jeremy's going to walk you through the steps needed to go from 0 customers to having a product that a market will pay you money for. Make sure to have your notes handy. Jeremy covers quite a few gems here. Enjoy. In today's episode, we talk about cold email for startups, specifically for those new companies out there who are listening and wondering, how do I get off the ground and get their 3rd, 4th, 5th customer using cold email, beginning early stages of a campaign?
Could be that you don't have any customer yet, or you may not even have an idea as to what to build yet, but you know that you want to start your startup, basically.
That's awesome. So I think using cold email to get your idea is probably worth a cast of its own. But for right now, Jeremy, let's start with that because we need an idea. We need something to sell. How would you use cold email to help find an idea for a startup?
That's a great way to start cold email to actually find your idea for your startup. I guess the most important thing is to figure out what market you want to tackle. And obviously, if your market is receptive to email. Like, let's say, for example, I want to reach out to hairdressers. Maybe hairdressers don't check their emails. And therefore, that's going to be very difficult to do it with cold email. So I guess that's the first point. Make sure your market is receptive to email or actually check their emails.
What's next?
Obviously, once you figured out that this is a market you want to go after, because there is plenty of criteria like making money and stuff. If you contact a market that has no money, then it's difficult to get money out of that market. So therefore, you wouldn't start your startup there, but a whole different type of advice. So assuming you picked up your market, you know it's replying to email. Well, how do you know it's replying to email? Well, a simple thing is to disguise yourself as a client and contact them. Just checking your price on your website. I'd like to get more precisions, is there anyone I can talk to? Or those sort of things will work wonder.
If you're not getting enough replies, then close the book on that market, right?
Potentially. I mean, it depends. So let's say, for example, that you get 80% reply rate. That will be the best you'll ever get. I mean, don't lure yourself. Yeah, you're not going to get better than, I'm a customer, I want to give you money. Where do I send it, right?
Okay.
So assuming you got 80%, I think that's fine. But even 40% may be fine too. It depends on the size of your market, right? If there is only 1,000 people in your market and you got, 10% reply rate, you're not going to fly, right, with that. So I guess make the math, right? That'll be the biggest advice here.
So let's say I've got my market picked. I know they reply. I know there's money there. Do you have any advice for me if I'm trying to find out what it is that they would be interested in paying money for?
Yes. So you will have to aim for interviews at this stage. So the great thing is you don't have to come up with the idea. You can effectively ask your market for ideas. And in order to do that, then you'd have to aim for, can I get more information about what they're doing, their problem, their pain points, things you can actually solve.
Got it.
I would say you could use cold email for that. That'll be a great way of using it to contact and not trying to sell anything, beside asking for a bit of their time in order to potentially help them, building the solution they'd love to.
Let's keep it rolling. Let's say I've got some people willing to jump on the phone with me. Do you have any pointers, questions I should be asking in order to extract this information that's going to help me build a product for them, like you mentioned?
I've been doing that for some time now, and I've been conducting more than 70 interviews with my market. And I honestly don't think you need that much if you really know what you're doing. Nowadays, I can probably do it within 10 interviews. But you can ask a series of questions. And what's important is you have to figure out, am I learning horizontally or vertically? And what I mean by that is horizontally is you know everything about the market. So let's say, for example, I'm contacting DJs, for example. Learning horizontally will be knowing that They need to have logistic involved. They need to contact multiple venues. They need to organize some tickets, some swags at the end. All those sort of things is the horizontal knowledge. So you know everything about the band. Vertically means like, okay, what's the problem right now they're trying to solve? Maybe their biggest problem is about getting people knowing them, right? So
getting more fans.
How they can do that, then that's what you want to explore. You want to keep on exploring more about the same subject. And you don't have to know that being a DJ also involves having logistic and stuff like that. But you narrow it down to one specific problem, the most important to them. And that way they will also give you attention, right? If you're talking about like, oh, how do you organize, the logistic and so on? It's like, yeah, I know the logistic, I'm fine. So, okay, I'm going to spend my time to explain it to you. But if my problem is about getting more fans and you want to know more about getting more fans, it helps me as well think about how do I get more fans? And that's what I call digging vertically. So you want to know everything they're doing to get more fans and then pick up the one that is actually providing the best results and just telling them how can we double that.
The horizontal questions would be, tell me about the different areas that you spend your time, from logistics, software, whatever, driving there, getting more fans. And then once you've identified sort of a hot area that they need some help with, you ask vertical questions to get to the heart of the matter here, to really figure out how you can step in and solve a great pain point.
That's exactly right. Except that you don't have to do it all into one interview. So for example, you could actually do a few interviews with just knowing horizontally the business, like, hey, tell me a bit more about this part of the business. I'm not quite familiar with it. And as you keep on listening, other people just mentioning the same thing, then you'll get a pretty good idea of how the industry is working as a whole. And then you can go ahead and then just do straight vertical kind of questions, but they can also come with your cold email. So let's say, for example, you identify that getting more fans and logistics of, moving instruments is a big deal in that industry. Then that's the sort of ideas you want to pick up to actually start cold email. So one great campaign for cold email once you're at that stage would be like, hey, I've been talking to 60 different DJs, in the last couple of months. They've mentioned they have problems around logistics. Is that also something you're experiencing? Just a simple question, simple reaching out to people. And notice that I brought up social proof, like, other people talk to me, so it's okay to talk to me kind of thing. But if you do it that way, then you'll get a lot of people telling you like, nah, that's not a problem for me. But that's exactly why you should interview them. It's like, oh, really? You'd love to know how they're doing it, because then you can understand what they're doing to solve it and then potentially create a product around it so other people don't have this problem. Don't trash too quickly the no, I don't have a problem kind of thing. So a negative reply in this case actually could be a very positive reply to some extent.
So I want to slow it down a bit because I think you've covered some gems here when it comes to figuring out what to build, I suppose. So I guess step one would be doing, really simple outreach just to do some customer interviews.
And I want to mention that it's pretty difficult at this stage because literally people are going to say, yeah, Jeremy, but I don't have any credential. Why would people want to talk to me? All those sort of like things creeping out. And I think this is the heart of cold email, right? So you have to create a narrative, a story in which it's okay to talk to you, right? So it could be like, hey, I'm just out of school. I really want to do entrepreneurship. And I've been studying music, or I know I say a lot of I. But the idea is you have to imagine a sort of like a story that will land nicely with people at that stage. One thing that works very well is using liking as a weapon of influence. You can check out episode on this one, which basically means like, hey, I'm like you a few years back. I want to also become a DJ. Is that okay if we can, have a few questions? Here's a few things I actually did, or music I did, or here's a few things, I want to reach out because I really love that type of music. I like how you're inspiring XYZ kind of thing. So you try to resonate with the audience and you say, can I get like 10 minutes of your time? So I figure out if, DJ, what are the things you struggle the most on your road to being a DJ? So that sort of thing is like giving back to the community is always something that people strive for once they reach a certain success. So that's something you can build on, for example, as a quick example.
Just a quick side note here. If you're running out of ideas on what to do to use liking in this first introduction email, maybe start off by just reaching out to people in your own city. So at least you share a common neighborhood or location. And that's sometimes good enough to help get this weapon of influence on your side when you are really early on in a cold email campaign.
As a side note, this is episode 29, liking, if you want to listen to it.
All right. So we've talked about conducting these early interviews, and then you start sending other cold emails that say, hey, I've talked to other DJs, or maybe even drop in, I've talked to 30 DJs. They've said that they struggle with logistics. Is this something that you struggle with too? And then you want to talk to these people, whether or not they say yes or no to you, because there's good information in both answers.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's true of cold email, is to open a conversation.
Yeah.
And then it's up to you to take that conversation wherever you want. So if people actually come up with a negative argument like, oh, no, we got no problem, then you could say, oh, that's exactly why I think we should talk, because maybe they're struggling with something else and other people have solved. So that's where you can actually be the connector or the sort of like knowledge transfer kind of person. And that's very valuable in itself.
So far, we haven't really talked about writing a hard-hitting cold email. It sounds like up until now, we're trying to, like always, start conversations, but also just say, hey, I'm trying to sort of test the waters here. Is this something that you're struggling with as well? And sort of piggybacking on that, letting the conversation carry itself so that you may sort of stumble on your first customer. Is that how you've seen it work in your experience?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got different strategies at this stage. One of the thing could be like, hey, after conducting like 70 interviews, here's what I came up with the top 3 pain points. And, do you want me to shoot over, my sort of like PDF? Like I've done a summary of all those interviews. And then people really love to know what other GJs are struggling with or what they've been. So it's very easy at that stage to open doors with more and more people, because now you become legit. You talk to a lot of people. You produce like maybe a good summary PDF that you could use as a lead generation capture to some extent. Like, this is what I've done. Is that okay if I shoot it your way? The only thing I'm asking in return is that you let me know your 3 struggling points or some stuff like that. And that opens the conversation as well. So you can be very creative, but you're absolutely right. You're not trying to sell anything or push any of your ideas yet at this stage.
So even if I'm just starting out and I have no data, I don't even have a customer who I can say has paid me money and I can profile them, this is an approach that works regardless. So let's get a little bit more granular here, Jeremy. Like, how many emails do you recommend a brand new startup or a founder who's still living at home, or I should say a founder who's still working in their parents' basement? Do you have any advice on how many emails they should be sending a day to get these interviews going? Or can you speak about like your experience if you were sending these emails while holding down another job?
Yes, I was. So the ideal thing is I will try to flip it on its head and actually look at the sort of like results. Like, you actually want probably X number of interviews per day. Obviously, if you're having a job, 1 or 2 per day is more than enough. So I think you should get away with probably like sending 20 emails a day or contacting 20 new people a day. That'd be more than enough. But obviously, it depends on what's your level. Did you actually raise money and you're already going full time? Which I wouldn't recommend, because honestly, you can do cold email while holding another position at any other job, and then only leaving once you got your idea and then people willing to give you money, because this actually is a very long phase. Remember, you're going on their agenda, you're not going on your agenda. So even for you have the full day, they may be freaking busy and only have time in 1 month to talk. And usually that's the type of people you want to talk to, the successful one, the one who are busy. So they're hard to catch. So I would say patience, patience, patience. But it's very important to be very focused into the being predictable, like doing the same amount of activities each day. So set up yourself to send 20 emails per day, for example. With your reply rate, you should land a certain number of interviews, within a week or 2.
So don't necessarily think about it like, oh, I got to send 20 emails a day. Instead, it's like you said, I want to land 1 interview a day or 5 a week. And in order to do that, based on these kinds of reply rates that I'm hearing people get, this is sort of the numbers that I'm going to have to reach if I want these results.
And be mindful that you don't want to burn your entire list in one go. The typical mistake would be like, okay, I got 1,000 DJ I want to contact. Let's blast them all, kind of thing, because you won't have time to learn from your mistakes. So limit yourself as well. It's not a game of how much I can. It's more a game of how fast can I learn without burning my entire list.
I think that's a really good tip that probably more of us need to listen to. I've got a couple more thoughts. Let's say someone's listening and they're exactly in this position. They're trying to get their startup off the ground. Do you have any, I don't know if words of encouragement is the wrong phrase here, but what might they be able to expect with cold email in, say, like a month or 2 months of just kind of staying on this? Is it possible for them to give themselves that kind of time frame, or is this a longer term strategy?
I guess it will depend on the market, but if you go from a genuine place of willing to listen to someone and willing to help someone, then it goes much faster. I've seen people who are just so needy, they don't get anything. Instead, pace yourself, give yourself 3 to 6 months, and then I think you're going to get your first interviews within probably 2 weeks' time if you do it well. And then remember, they keep on rolling. The efforts you're doing today are going to be only fruitful in like 2 weeks' time, right? So if there is a week you're stopping, then you may not notice it until everything runs dry. It's like a funnel kind of thing.
Last thing, Jeremy, and then I'll have my closing little question for you. But do you have any advice on what should I do on my own? Or maybe what should I pay someone $10 an hour to help me with? Maybe it's a virtual assistant.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're meaning about, like what stage is smart to outsource to someone. I'll say definitely start doing it even manually. Don't use a software at the beginning, because that way you really understand what's involved in all that effort, and then maybe you value the software a bit more. Because when you look at it, it could be like, oh, that many dollars for doing only that kind of thing, but you kind of understand the value of following up and stuff like that as you do it. So I'd say start the first week manually, and then very quickly pick up a tool. It doesn't matter which tool you're picking up at the end of the day, because you want to spend the least amount of effort in the tool. And in terms of automating, like I said, do it yourself first. And once you understand what's involved into it, if it is a repetitive task that you can outsource to someone else, then yeah, go ahead and then grab, a VA or find a software that can do it for you. But I don't think there is any substitute. Sure, you can skip it, but you will miss some information here in your business if you don't do it manually first yourself.
Jeremy, there's a lot of awesome stuff in this cast. To just close it out, any last things that someone who's getting their startup off the ground might need to know when they're dipping their toe into the world of cold email to do some customer interviews and capture their first couple customers?
Yeah, one last thing is not necessarily cold email per se. I would say try to find other channels as well, like maximize the number of channels until you find something that works for you. It may not end up being cold email. It could be, I don't know, LinkedIn introduction. Although I was banned from LinkedIn from doing that for at the very beginning. That's a different story. And that's actually why I moved to cold email. But it could be Twitter, it could be Facebook. It doesn't really matter. It's where your people are. And if you can do it in person, then all the better. I know it's nerve-wracking. It's more nerve-wracking, in face-to-face than it is by sending email. Or you can combine different things. You can actually send a cold email and then just follow up by a phone call and say, hey, I've sent you an email. I admire so much what you do. Then I just wanted to figure out if you received my email or if this is something you'd like to do. So mix and match, try as much things as you can and then see what sticks. But keep the eye on the ball. It's not the tool that will make the difference. It's not necessarily the channel that will make the difference, but it's the relentless activity that you're doing moving toward your goal that is going to make the difference. There's all too often people trying something one week, saying it doesn't work, claiming it doesn't work, and then moving on. Where in fact, if they stick a bit longer, then they will get the results they actually wanted in the first place. Stick at it, pick up something, become great at it, and then things get easier and easier. It's like a big ball you're pushing. At the beginning, it requires a lot of effort and it doesn't move much, but by the end, the inertia of the ball makes it much easier to roll on its own even.
Jeremy, this has been awesome. I'm sure a lot of people listening are going to be putting a lot of this into action. They're sitting there with their notepad out, Myself included, this has been awesome. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge, man.
Cool. You bet.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Okay, so here's a few things to keep in mind as you're starting out your startup with cold email. Number one, start with a market, not a product. Instead, let your market tell you what to build, not the other way around. Number two, make sure to ask vertical questions to get to a product people will pay for instead of horizontal questions that just scratch the surface. And finally, number three, use what you learned in past communications with prospects and potential customers to open new doors with more people in your market. Now stick around for part 2, where you'll learn how to land your very first customers with a simple cold email approach. Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high five by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast,
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.